Good morning, everyone. It's good to see all of you here on the first Sunday of Lent. If we haven't met before, my name is Colin. I'm the pastor here at Branches, and it's just my joy to welcome you here. I'd love, especially if it's one of your first times here, if you would check in. You can scan this QR code or tap the circle on the chair in front of you to check in and let us know you're here. Get you on the email list. You can see what's going on in the life of our community. It allows me to welcome you here and to invite you back, and would just love for you to check in today. It really helps you stay connected, especially in this season where we're seeking to grow spiritually, kind of reassess our lives, make our way to Easter, and I just want to give you that opportunity to let us know you're here today so we can be your companion in that. Like I said, it's the first Sunday of Lent, and Lent is the season, those 40 days leading up to Easter, the Resurrection Sunday. And before that, we journey through the story of Jesus as these stations depict here, all the way up to the cross, and then the resurrection of Jesus on Easter. And so over the course of Lent, we take an opportunity, like I said, to reassess, to reflect, to maybe ask some hard questions of ourselves, to adopt new spiritual practices, to fast from some things, small and large things. And then on Sunday, we can unfast from those things. If you're fasting from Diet Coke, like I mentioned last week, it's on the menu today. You can have it, because Sundays are like little Easters. They're these little bookends along the way for us to look over the season together. And this season of Lent, we're in a series called How to Die. If you want to not grow your church, you should teach all of the hard sayings of Jesus. In particular, this one, a common theme of Jesus, is dying and self-denial. Love your neighbor. We can get on board with that. You don't have to be a Christian to like that one. Think about the poor and the oppressed. Yeah, cool. Nobody's going to be like, no. We don't want to do that. But this one, self-denial and death, is a common way that Jesus talks about discipleship to him. To follow Jesus in Jesus' mind and in his teaching is in some sense to die. To die a particular sort of death to yourself, to your desires, to your flesh, as Paul puts it, to die a sort of death. And that's what I want us to do, not just today, but over the course of all of these weeks of Lent, is to ask that question, because I'm asking it of myself, what does it mean to deny myself? What does it mean to die, as Jesus puts it? We are a how-to people. We love to ask these questions, like, how do I do a certain thing? It's what makes my mom think I'm an IT genius. Because when she has a computer problem, I just Google how to blank, and then I get all the steps, and someone else way smarter than I am figures it out. But to my mom, I'm a hero. I'm a genius. It's like pastor and computer technician, amazing. Professional Google, really, is what it is. There's these great Instagram accounts or TikTok accounts of people taking pictures of folks on the subway or other public transit and seeing what they're reading. Maybe it's the newest Stephen King or Colleen Hoover or whatever else, and you kind of get a pulse of what people are reading, and you kind of see the sorts of people that are reading certain things. And there's one, when I think about those accounts, that always sticks out to me that I think is really great, is this one. This woman is reading How to Sleep Well. And I can't tell how far she is into it, but it works. So if you are trying to fall asleep well, like this woman on the subway, maybe this is a good book to read. I could recommend you some other ones that might put you to sleep, but this one seems like a pretty good one. And it's emblematic for me of what this series should be about. How to die, how to deny self. And that's what I want to do today to kind of frame the rest of this series, is to set us up to ask good questions when we're confronted by the hard sayings of Jesus. Asking good questions is central. Asking good questions about what Jesus' teaching means is really important to our discipleship. You have probably heard, and I may have probably done a sermon that takes a hard saying of Jesus and smooths out the rough edges, or over-spiritualizes so as to avoid the physical, practical application of them. To weasel my way out of actually dealing with what Jesus is confronting me with and poking me and prodding me with. But if we ask questions of it, and if it asks questions of us, and if we turn it over and look at it in a different way and maybe peruse it and examine it a little bit, if we ask good questions of these hard teachings of Jesus, they're transformative. They're life-shaping. They're life-changing. There's this really great book that just came out, I think last year, called The Art of Asking Better Questions by J.R. Briggs. And he tells a story at the beginning of the chapter on questions as influence, like how questions can influence us. And he tells this short anecdote. After graduating from the United States Naval Academy in 1946, Jimmy applied for the government's prestigious nuclear submarine program. The program was led by the ever-demanding Admiral Hyman Rickover. During his interview, Rickover told Jimmy he could discuss any topics he wished to talk about with him. And the young graduate was well-versed in current events, seamanship, music, literature, naval tactics, marksmanship, to name a few, but Rickover grilled him. And the more questions Jimmy was asked, the more he realized he was in over his head. And finally, the young officer heard the question he was waiting for, the one he could use to redeem himself. Admiral Rickover said, "How did you stand in your graduating class at the Naval Academy?" "I graduated 59th in my class of 820, sir," he replied confidently. He was sure he would be congratulated, but the admiral was not impressed. Then came another question. "Did you do your best?" He was tempted to quickly answer yes, but the more he thought of his time at the Naval Academy, the more he realized when he could have learned more, applied himself more, prepared himself to learn about enemies and allies' strategies and weapons. He cleared his throat and responded, "No, sir, I did not always do my best." Admiral Rickover then turned around in his chair and promptly ended the interview by asking a final question, "And why not?" That question haunted and motivated Jimmy for the rest of his life, shaping him in ways that eventually led him to be the president and Nobel Prize winner we know as Jimmy Carter. A little nested secret there. What a twist. I want for us over Lent, Jesus to be, in some sense, our Admiral Rickover. That we come in maybe puffed up, standing tall, in many ways we should, and then be confronted by these questions, these hard teachings of Jesus that turn us inward, that make us self-reflect, that cut off our quick, assured answer and bring us to something more interior, more reflective, more life-changing. We get one such teaching today that I think should frame all of our Lenten seasons. A hard saying of Jesus that sticks, really sticks, on what the whole project of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection means. And we're in Mark 8. Just a reminder, Mark is, we know, the oldest gospel, the earliest one, the first collection of Jesus' saying, teachings, and life story. And this is one of the first times Jesus is really explicit about his ministry and mission. And this is what he says. We're in Mark 8:34. It says this: "He, Jesus, called the crowd with his disciples and said to them, 'If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake and for the sake of the gospel will save it. For what will it profit them to gain the whole world and forfeit their life? Indeed, what can they give in return for their life? Those who are ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of them the Son of Man will also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels.'" Friends, this is the word of God for us, the people of God. Thanks be to God. If that teaching of Jesus is not in some sense a gut punch, I'd be happy to read it to you again. That every time I hear this, and commonly quoted teaching of Jesus, I hear, do you want to gain your life? Then lose it. Do you want to follow me? Deny yourself and take up your cross and follow me. Are you ashamed of me and my teachings? Because if you're ashamed of me, I'm going to be ashamed of you. It's just a series of like, boom, boom, boom. Thanks, Jesus. I feel great about myself now. Everything is wonderful. But it also, like Admiral Rickover, helps me ask helpful questions about what these things mean. Not in a way to flatten out or to smooth over the rough edges, but to embrace the questions that bubble up as a means of my transformation. First, I think on top of all of our minds, especially during Lent, is what it means to take up your cross. Of course, these biographies of Jesus that we have and that we read together as part of Common at Branches are written after the fact. After Jesus has gone to the cross and been raised from the dead and has started this new community of people, these were written in and for those communities. And so when they read Jesus talk about going to the cross, they have the kind of benefit of retrospect to say, like, yeah, all this happened. And though the disciples in the moment, like Peter, who gets rebuked by Jesus, didn't have that benefit, didn't expect that to happen, didn't want that to happen, we now know that did happen. We look back that indeed Jesus went to the cross. And his disciples also went to public shame or denied Jesus and were ashamed of him and ran away. We have the benefit, again, of retrospect. And so we have to ask, if this is for followers after the fact, early Christians in the first century, what does it mean for them to take up their cross? There's lots of literature out there on the practice of crucifixion in the Roman world. Archaeological understanding, historical understanding, people in that time talking about the practice of crucifixion. If you ever are down for a sad time, a downer of a time, there's a lot of stuff out there to read about crucifixion. Like, I'm going to sit down on my Saturday and enjoy a nice book about crucifixion. Lovely. The Romans were pros at crucifixion in efficiency, in practice, and also what it was public terror and display for people in the first century. That a person would be crucified to their public shame. They would carry the crossbeam so other people could see them as an example, as a deterrent, and then often would be crucified and then put in a place where people coming in and out of the community would see it as a warning. Imagine then hearing Jesus say, that's what I'm going to, and if you follow me, you can expect the same sort of public shame and attention. Then he says, it's the crowd's decision and response. Do you want that? Do you want to follow me? Do you want that to be part of your story? That's the good question for us. What does it mean for us to take up our cross, and what does it mean for us to associate ourselves now with that? Good, helpful question as we continue in this season. Second, if you read any of the Gospels, mostly Mark, you see over and over again Jesus teach something or perform a miracle or a healing and then tell the recipients or the seers, the witnesses of it, don't tell anybody about this. They, of course, then go on to tell everyone about it. But he's trying to keep his status and his identity secret. The scholars call it the messianic secret. He's trying to keep a lid on it so that things could happen in a certain sequence or order. Here, the secret is broken open. And he says, first to the inner group, the 12 disciples, it says he holds nothing back. He tells them the whole thing. This is where I'm going to go. This is what's going to happen to me. And then the passage we read today, he brings the crowds with the disciples, all the people that are around, and says, this is the manner of death I'm going to die. If you want to follow me, likewise. He cracks open the secret. And that's the second question for us to ask is, who is Jesus and what is he seeking to accomplish or do? What's his overall mission? What is he telling his inner circle and the crowds that if they follow him will be the outcome? What is he trying to do by this manner of death and resurrection? That he's going to take up a cross, that his people are going to live cross-shaped lives, that their life should reflect in some way this story of Jesus. Third, we get this thing that's called a chiasm. It's a rhetorical device of pairing two things together and looking at them two different ways. First, if you want to gain your life, you got to lose it. And if you lose your life for me and my sake and the sake of the gospel, you'll gain your life. The Greek word here is psyche, and we use that word in a particular way in English, but psyche here is meaning your entire self, the totality of your being. To gain your whole self, not a compartmentalized, chopped up, atomized version of yourself, but your whole life, to gain it, you got to lose it. In many ways, the way that you're preserving your life is making you lose it totally. But if you give it, if you're open-handed with your life, if you're outward-oriented, if you deny yourself your desires, the things that you think you need or want, you gain your life in Jesus. It's the story of the crucifixion and resurrection in micro, that you die with Jesus, and having died with him, you're raised with him. But what is there to lose is the helpful question here. What is Jesus asking me to lose? What do I think is gain but is actually not giving me anything? Another helpful question. According to whom? Who's the measurer? What's the metric by which I can categorize things by a gain or a loss? As we next week talk about possessions and money, what is a loss there and what do we gain? Helpful framing question for us. Fourth, Jesus strangely gives value to social shame. In Jesus' time, and actually kind of in our time too, it was an honor-shame culture. Honor was a currency. You think about the tax collectors in Jesus' time. They forsook honor in their internal community and sought honor in the Roman Empire by working for them. You see that play out in the Gospels all the time, the shame that the tax collectors felt because they played into this empirical oppression. And so Jesus says, okay, honor is this currency, but shame for my sake is actually worth more. He imbues shame for the gospel, the shame of the cross, with strange beauty and value. To be ashamed for him and for the gospel, for this good news about who Jesus is of great value. And anything else you could gain will never measure up. What does it mean for us then to measure that cost? What does it mean for us then to, with Jesus, understand our own shame? Shame, strangely, is like physical pain. Physical pain tells you there's something going on physically wrong with you. And it could, on the other end, lead to something good, like the pain you feel when you run or when you work out or whatever, is your body telling you that you're straining it, and then there's some benefit on the other end. Likewise, shame, people with consciences have shame. They feel they've done something wrong. They feel like they've had like a misconduct or something in their lives. But shame isn't something you carry around forever. But what social, cultural costs do we have when we follow Jesus? It's easy in our culture to identify as a Christian, to call yourself a Christian. There's no social cost to that at all. And likewise, in Jesus' time, you think about the disciples, those 12 that he gathered together. Simon the Zealot, revolutionary guy, if we want to kind of map our own political persuasion and spectrum on there, like a far left person, and then Matthew, this tax collector, on the other end of the spectrum, like in the same circle. And Jesus, as an equal opportunity offender, tells them both, this will cost you something. Social capital, being part of an in-group, being associated with me is going to hurt you, is going to change you, is going to cost you some status. There's these great letters by a Christian in the 1700s named John Newton. This is the Select Letters of John Newton. I know it's some of your absolute favorite book, the Select Letters of John Newton. Really, though, if you want some good devotional material and you can overcome the 1700s English, it's rich, it's full. John Newton, in London in 1775, went to an exhibit of a jeweler's work. His name was James Cox. And James Cox created these clocks and toys and other mechanistic creations with jewels and gold and fine metals and stones. And he had this exhibit in London in the fall of 1775. And John Newton went to look at them. And he tells a story that helps illustrate the depth that this kind of questioning and being questioned by Jesus can come to. This is what he says about his experiencing these beautiful toys and clocks of James Cox. He says, "When I was lately at Mr. Cox's museum, while I was fixing my attention upon some curious movements, imagining that I saw the whole of the artist's design, the person who showed it touched a little spring, and suddenly 1,000 new and unexpected motions took place. And the whole piece seemed animated from the top to the bottom. I should have formed but a very imperfect judgment of it, had I seen no more than what I saw at first. I thought it might be in some measure illustrate the vast difference that is observable amongst professors, even amongst those who are, it is to be hoped, sincere. There are persons who appear to have true knowledge in part of the nature of gospel religion, but seem not to be apprised of its properties in their comprehension and extent." Translation: in seeing this toy, this clock, by touching a spring come to life and seeing its inner workings, he went from a superficial, in part understanding from what this thing was, to an in-motion, dynamic, fuller understanding of what it was. So it is with these hard teachings and questions of Jesus, that upon first look, they may make us want to turn away. They may be like, well, that's for somebody else. That's for the disciples in the first century. They may be simplified. They may not be helpful for us. But in touching them and reaching out to them, embracing them, letting them confront us, hopefully, and I think the promise is from Jesus, all of it begins to come to life. Every mechanistic part of the gospel begins to touch and be in working together and be in harmony, and we start to see more of a fuller understanding of that good news of Jesus and not just a superficial, in part, atomized understanding of it. To frame these weeks of Lent, I think that's such a helpful thing for us to keep in mind. yes, on first pass, we may hear or read a teaching of Jesus that hits us in a place we don't want to be hit, or brings up a topic that we'd rather not talk about, or is incisive in a way that could be spiritually, emotionally painful at first. But in touching it, and embracing it, and examining it, and leaning into it, we see the whole thing come to life. We are, like in this passage today, invited to carry a cross beam of shame and maybe even humiliation, of attention that from the outside looking in seems bad, but is actually our whole life. We are invited to live a cross-shaped life, a sacrificial life, not a gain as much as we can life, but a life that is open-handed and outward and other-oriented. We're invited to lose our life instead of preserve it for our own sake, but to lose it for the good news' sake, for this good news that is universal, that is for everyone, that is meant to touch every person, not just the people we like or prefer it to touch. And it also undomesticates Jesus. If we go to Jesus and we read these sayings, and we find a way to make them just sound like something we already believe or think or desire, if our reading of the gospel stories, in particular the hard sayings of Jesus, just feel like a pat on the head, like, good little disciple, I knew you already believed that, you're so good, you did such a great job. That's not Jesus confronting us. That's us embracing a version of Jesus that looks an awful lot like us and has no staying power, has no power to transform, has no power to challenge, has no power to encourage, has no power to confront anything in us, and has no power to resurrect on the end of this season. My invitation to you as we go through these next several weeks, and I'm there with you, I read a teaching of Jesus and I'm like, I thought I might want to preach on this. I'll tell Carrie and Marcel and Lauren, like, can we change the text for this weekend? Can we do something nicer? Can we just do like Psalm 1 or 150 or, love your neighbor, something we all agree on? And that indicates to me that I'm not seeing the news as a whole. I'm seeing it only in part. At the end of Lent, as it was from the very beginning, Christians were baptized only on Easter. They did this time of preparation, of self-examination, of teaching, of learning of the doctrines of Christ, learning of the doctrine of the church, and then at the end, having denied themselves and mortified and let all the things that needed to die on that end, they were raised to new life on Easter. Many of you, most of you probably have been baptized. If you haven't been and you're looking for that opportunity, I'd love to talk to you about it. But if anything, at the end of this this Lenten season at Easter, whatever we've left behind, whatever we've denied, whatever we've examined, whatever Jesus has confronted us with, then on Easter we can be raised to something new. Not in part, but in whole, dynamic, beautiful, cross-shaped, love-shaped life. And that's Jesus' invitation for us. And thanks be to God for that. Let's pray. Jesus, we're grateful, even if not at first, but in the middle of them. We're grateful for your hard sayings, your hard teachings. We're grateful that your word, even 2,000 years old, confronts us, challenges us, shows us things about ourselves and our world and our community that we cannot see without you. And we ask that you'd make us incisive, inquisitive, questioning, examining people. That we'd ask the right questions, that we might carry them as a burden to see the world around us in a new way, to see it as you see it, to transform us, to shape us, ultimately in your image, to be people of love like you. We ask all of this in your name, Jesus the Christ. Amen.